Tax filing season has begun. Joining me in the studio to discuss some of the tax credits, like the earned income tax credit many taxpayers have missed out on, as well as assistance in tax preparation and filing for free, are Josephine McNeil, Barbara Seal, and Simon Dolan of Can Do. Thank you all for joining me. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
So it's my understanding that this is the 50th anniversary of the earned income tax credit that have played a significant role in strengthening America's working family. So maybe one of you could tell us, what is the EITC?
Okay. So EITC stands for Earned Income Tax Credit. And as you said, it's been in existence 50 years. It's changed somewhat from when it began 50 years ago. But it is a credit that working families and but in some instances, and we can talk about that more, just individuals can also benefit from it. So based on someone's income, family size, and other factors, people qualify to benefit from the credit. And it is a credit that is called a refundable credit, which means that it's available to people even if they didn't pay taxes. Because of that status, they are able to actually get money from the federal government, which is why, for us, Can Do as a nonprofit, this is a service that we feel that is really important, and especially for families.
So how does one find out if they in fact do qualify for EITC?
They can contact the Can Do office and set up an appointment to go through the tax information. And there are tools available on the IRS website and questionnaires to go through to see what the factors are and how their facts fit in with that.
So basically just contacting someone. So, and if they do qualify, could they claim? Because I've read that some people can claim from previous years.
Yes, that's true. You can file a tax return. You can file a tax return going back many years if you haven't filed. You can get a refund if one is due for you up to 3 years after the tax return was initially due. So for example, up till middle of April this year, you will actually be able to get a refund if it was due on not just your 24, but your 23, your 22, and even your 21 tax return. Because the 21 tax return would have been due in April of 22, you add 3 years, that's April of 25.
Gotcha.
But any previous years, I'm afraid, if you owe money, the IRS still wants it, but the IRS won't give you back money if they owe you money.
I guess that makes sense.
To the IRS.
So are there free tax preparation options? I know Can Do offers a couple of them.
Yeah, yes, through the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program that's sponsored by the IRS and who provides training to volunteers. There's a volunteer option for no-fee tax preparation. There are certain income requirements for the people who come. And usually we will do both the federal and the state. Mostly it's Massachusetts, but sometimes other states have come into play. So we're available to do that. And in addition, there's the IRS Direct File program, which is it's operated directly by the IRS for certain tax returns, which are not too complex, but still would fit the needs of most people. And
so I think if I can just jump in, I believe the direct file doesn't do self-employment right now. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are certain restrictions.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas with VITA, we can do self-employment with some limitations. But so, for example, if you're an Uber driver or a Lyft driver, that's something we will be able to help with.
Gotcha.
Okay. And just expand a little bit more on that. Maybe, Simon, you can talk a little bit sort of about what the process is for the volunteers. We Can Do has solicited volunteers. We've been very fortunate over the 2.5 years that we've, and there are people in the community who want to help other people. Maybe you can expand on
So
that.
all of the volunteers have to undergo training, which is run and provided by the IRS. That training includes some basics about ethics and how you interview people and deal with people, but then includes an awful lot of detail on tax law, and there are various different levels of tax law which the volunteers have to certify in. So all of the volunteers have undergone a course and taken a very complicated exam which they've passed in order to become a VITA volunteer.
How many volunteers do you currently have?
We'll have about 10 going into
10?
this year, I think. Yeah.
How many, I guess, families do they work, or individuals do they work with at a time?
Typically we will do, it takes between 1 and 2 hours for someone to go all the way through the process with the interview and the return and then reviewing the return. So we'll typically do a volunteer will maybe do 2 in an afternoon, or maybe 3 if it's very busy.
That sounds great. So one of the questions is, what is the difference between a tax credit and a refund? Are there two different things, correct?
I think you'll probably mean a refund, a credit and a deduction.
Thank you, yes.
So fundamentally, when you look at your income tax return, there are things called deductions and there are things called credits. What a deduction does, it just reduces the income you have to pay tax on. So for example, if your income was $50,000 and you have $10,000 of deductions, then you only have taxable income of $40,000 and you would calculate your tax on that. A credit is something that offsets the tax you owe dollar for dollar. So if you have $50,000 of income and you owe $5,000 of taxes, but you have $3,000 of credits, then you only pay $2,000 of taxes. So credits are worth more than deductions.
It's a good thing you're here to explain that.
And it's also worth mentioning that for most people with low to moderate incomes, something called the standard deduction is now fairly universal. With the 2017 tax reform, the standard deduction was raised to be, I think it's now $14,900 for an individual and $29,000 for a married couple. So the standard deduction is now higher than most people would have with itemizing deductions.
In terms of the credits, what other credits are available for someone to take a look at? Because a lot of people may not know that some of these are out there.
Well, there are deductions that help people who have dependent children or other dependents in their families that they care for. For example, the federal child tax credit, the additional child tax credit, and there are other dependent credits, the so-called other dependent credit, which is if you have a dependent, someone that you're taking care of and for whom you're providing resources, who is not your child.
Perhaps a parent or a relative of some sort. Could it even be a friend?
It could be. It could be if you're providing support and meet certain requirements. Yes. Okay. And also there are age limitations for the different categories. For a child, for example. And otherwise, there are some education-related credits, some of which are refundable. I think I don't know which ones are.
The American Opportunity Credit has a refundable portion.
Yeah.
It's worth
for higher education expenses and other education expenses.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. So credits, as we said earlier, reduce the tax you owe. So one question is, what happens if you don't owe any tax? Well, some of the credits are special credits. They're called refundable credits. And even if you don't owe any tax, you can get the refundable credit back. So you can owe no tax, and the IRS will actually send you money. And so the earned income tax credit, the additional child tax credit, and the American Opportunity Credit all fall into that category. So even if you have a income that is below, for example, the standard deduction, which would be $29,000 or so for a married couple, you might still actually, which means you'd owe no tax, you may still end up getting tax back from the earned income tax credit as a refundable credit.
Okay. And I just want to expand what the reason Can Do started offering this service was because in 2021, the Biden administration and Congress passed the American Rescue Plan. And as a part of the American Rescue Plan, they dramatically allocated the amount of, increased the amount of money that was allocated per child. And it also covered anybody who had children. Prior to that, you had to earn, I believe, a certain amount of money before you could take advantage of that. And so it went from, I don't know, a little, somewhere around $2,000 per child, to if you had a child between 0 and 5, you could get $3,600 per child, and then from 6 to 18, you could get $3,000. So if you only had two children and those two ranges, that was $6,600 that came to family. And that's why, if you remember, in 2022, there was all this discussion about how childhood poverty had been reduced, and that's why, because families were able to get that money, and of course, if the family got it, it benefited the child. So that's why we started doing it. And as Simon mentioned before, this year we are doubling down on trying to reach families who, people who had children in 2021, but did not take advantage of the credit, because the way they rolled the credit out, the first 6 months, people automatically got it. You know, just like you got the stimulus checks that went out, it was the same sort of thing. But they got the other half of the year, because the credit goes for a year, people had to file a tax return. So this is the last year that people can get the rest of the money that they should have going to them. So we are focused on that.
Yeah, and this is very specifically for 2021. You know, that credit went away from 2022 and on.
Yeah.
Another wrinkle is, if you had a child in 2021, that wouldn't have shown up at all, so you wouldn't even have got the 6 months they paid out. But you would actually, if you had a child at any point in 2021, you are deemed as having had the child the whole year, so you would actually get the full credit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
No, I hadn't thought about that. That
Yeah.
is, yeah.
we had someone like that last year,
Yeah.
that's why.
Aha. So what do you suggest that someone do right now in order to get started? Who should they contact? Where should they look?
Well, they can go to several places in terms of our VITA site. They can go to the Can Do website. There is a, I don't know, across the top, what do they call those? The icon, it says VITA. And that will provide information about how people can contact us. The process is that people will send a call, they leave a message, which is an electronic message, which I get, and I contact the person who called and gather the information that enables the volunteers to be able to help people. I find out specific kinds of information to let them know that that we can help them. In some instances, which we didn't really talk about, Simon talked about the learning process, the training. There are some areas in which we can't help because people haven't been trained in those areas, because these are for low and moderate income people, so you assume there's not a level, of sophistication that those people have, and so those are called out of scope. And so part of what I do is, somebody calls and they don't meet the income qualifications, or they need help with something then I have to, I advise them that we can't. We'd love to help them,
Right.
but we can't.
So you kind of filter everyone through and then send them,
Yeah.
or help them, or redirect them if they need to be.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I know we could keep talking about this for quite some time, but limited time. But I'd like to thank you all for coming. And of course, you can find out more information online at the website below. Newt News will be right back.